going to slide right into our keynote here, our day 3 keynote. Welcome. I'm Mike Boland. I'm an analyst with BI at Kelsey. And we have Daniel Eckert, who's Managing Director of Emerging Technologies at PricewaterhouseCoopers. We want to kind of depart a little bit from sessions and presentations that are directly about marketing tactics and these other things, and really take a step back, do something that's more along the lines of a TED Talk. What are the macro factors and the cultural factors and all of the things really driving this? So Daniel, I'll get out of your way, let you give your presentation, and then we'll have a discussion when you're done. So.
Thank you all for joining. Again, Daniel Eckert from PricewaterhouseCoopers. You probably wonder, who are we? If you don't know who we are, we're a $34 billion consultancy with 195,000 employees in 157 countries. I want to talk a little bit about context. And I sat through a couple of the presentations, and I'm thinking about this hyper-local and how it all works together. And I always like to step back a little bit and try to figure out, how did this all materialize? And my role in emerging technologies at PwC is really look at these disruptors and help our clients understand how it's going to change the way they go to market, how they do business, how they are going to disrupt the industry or be disrupted. Right? And Kevin Kelly is a great guy. He's this amazing futurist. If you've never seen this guy, YouTube him. He's awesome. You might know him as one of the original founding editors of Wired magazine. And he has this great quote that I followed that he had a couple years ago about the fact that if he was actually transported 20 years back in time and he was presenting to a group like this, and one of the questions from the audience might be, well, what's so cool about 2015? Is it flying cars, or what's going on 20 years from now? So if you go back to 1995, so this is what he's talking about, and he presents to them, he says, I've got this device in my hand. It has the access to all the knowledge of all humanity. The fact that I can get real-time sports scores, I get real-time weather, I get real-time stock updates, the fact that I can download and search over 20 million songs and listen to them. I can look at almost any video or movie ever created, right? And what's really cool is I can do it for almost no cost. They would have declared me to be simply insane. And that's only 20 years ago, right? If you think about it, if you go back in time, well, you know what? Let's just put things in context, right? That's the important thing, is when we think about context, what does that really mean? And I love this quote from Michael Ventura, who is a journalist that's down at the Austin Chronicle. He writes about some really interesting things. But the one thing he says here is that knowledge is information. And in context, it's about connecting the dots. And in hyperlocal marketing, that's what you guys are really looking to do, is how do I connect the dots between all this data that's collected in the geo-vicinity of where I'm at, and how do I get it to the right consumer at the right time, right? And so let's look at this with a different lens, the lens in which we see this. A lot of you may have seen this picture before. This is from 2005 at St. Peter's Square during the reveal of the new Pope. It's a great little image. Everybody's all looking in one direction. Everybody's waiting for someone to say something and then produce it out in the news media. And in 8 years, this is the difference. So this is when Pope Francis was brought in to St. Peter's Square, and this is only 8 years. And I love this image just for a lot of different things that it says. First of all, everybody in this picture has a mobile device, right? That's pretty obvious. In fact, everybody in this room has one, if not two, right? But what's really I like about it, it's about the fact that they're all sharing something that's intimate to them with their individual network. They've democratized the distribution of information, of knowledge, right? So they've connected the dots with their each individual network, and they've brought in their own perspective on how something occurred. They're not dependent on CNN or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or whatnot. They've brought it in and shared it with their individual network. So it's all really about the center of the universe, which is the user, and the user's the center of the experience. And that's what this mobile device has brought to us. In the last couple presentations, you're talking about the fact that we know where you're at, right? We know who you are. We know your identity. We know what you shop for. We know actually physically what direction I'm facing, right? Through beacons and other technology and proximity detectors within our immediate network, right? I know who's on your calendar. I know who your contacts are. And in fact, this digital device that I carry with me goes everywhere I go. There's a statistic that was recently released that 72% of the people that are within 3 miles of their house, if they realized they forgot their mobile phone, would turn around and go back and get it. I've actually done 40 miles to go back and get my phone just before I got on an airplane and missed my flight, because having that device with me is so critical. But what it's really saying is that mobile device is a digital representation of me. It represents me on the internet, right? I, as an atom-based type of individual, can't physically be electronic, but this device represents me, and that's what we market to. That's what really represents us. So, as we look at this, back in 2010, Paul D'Alessandro, a partner, and I sat down and thought about, well, where's all this going? Where did it come from and where is it going? And we came up with this maturity model. The fact that it all starts with a communicator, right? The mobile phone itself was a communicator. In the early 70s, Marty Cooper from Motorola invented the mobile phone. In 1983, they finally commercialized it. In the latter part of the 80s, it actually became to be very commonplace, right? So in the 80s, so probably 18 years ago is when it really started hitting the consumer space. And it was always that communicator. It changed the whole place-space paradigm. You no longer called home. You never called work. You now just call the individual, because that's where they're at, right? They're in a space, not a place, right? And then you started looking at the transition into this next area, which becomes this application platform. BlackBerry introduced messaging, and then finally they introduced email, contact management, and calendaring back in the early 2000s. And then Apple in 2007 introduced the iPhone and kind of changed everything. But it wasn't really until 2008 that they introduced the App Store, that the phone itself became an application platform. There's over 1 million applications in iOS, 1.3 million applications on Android, and there's literally an app for everything. And I'm sure you've heard this over and over again. But when the iPhone was introduced in 2007, they started also to introduce sensors in their mobile device. The fact that it's got a proximity detector, it's got an accelerometer, it's got a compass, and it's got all this other proximity type of networking capabilities that haven't really been in a single device before, right? And the fact that you've got a communications platform, an applications platform, and a monitoring platform all working together in concert really drives you to the fourth dimension, which we're talking about, is this addressable digital assistant. This avatar that supports you, this knowledge navigator, this someone that represents you. But there's a little piece that's missing, and you're starting to see it. And what's really cool is you're seeing it here first in marketing, but you're also starting to see it in the commercial spaces. And it's this concept of contextual awareness. How do I, going back to Mike Ventura's quote, how am I connecting the dots, right? I've got the communication device, I've got the application platform, I've got the sensors. I'm putting them all together to work in concert via this concept of contextual aware computing to provide something that's real to the individual, right? So let's talk a little bit about this. Hold on a second. Let's define this so we're all on the same page, because now we're getting a little geeky, and I just want to make sure we bring it back to reality, is that it refers to a style of computing, but the key here is it's situational, environmental information, and it's used that way, right? And it anticipates the immediate need, not the batch processing demographic view, we have a group of people and they all act this way. We actually truly go hyper-local down to the individual and provide them something contextual that's important to them. So let me give you 2 simple examples. The first one is I'm standing in front of a vending machine, right? And it knows that every day around 10 o'clock I get the munchies and it's time to get some sugar in my system. I go to the vending machine. It knows that history about me, and it can give me a little nudge that goes, candy bar, good stuff. And I could go ahead and get that. That's a very simple example. Something more complex might be Tesla just last Tuesday introduced a new software patch for their cars. And if you're not familiar with Tesla, it's the electric car company that build these amazing sports cars that go really fast and on an electric charge. And one of the big concerns about Teslas were the fact that they would run out of power and you didn't really have any place you could plug them in. So Tesla created this contextual aware application that runs in the car, which is nothing more than a rolling hotspot. And the fact that it communicates to them when they get out of range or when they're going to get out of range, because they might have something in the navigation system and they're going to point B, and it says, you're not going to make point B. You need to charge before that. And it will tell them where to go. And then also provide them, based on their previous behavior, maybe they want to go someplace to charge that has tea or coffee or sandwiches, or they want to be social, or they just want to go to the library and read a book. So it provides them the appropriate type based on their previous history and what they've done. And this is all done through a contextual aware engine. So let's just get a little deeper in how this all works. You have a device, it has a sensor, it collects data, it sends it over a network into a cloud, and then it brings it into this context engine. And that context engine does a lot of calculations and it creates a notification, right? We call it a nudge to kind of push you in the direction that I want you to go in, right? And then it goes out to that device, back over that transport again, and you either act on it or you don't, right? But if you do act on it or you don't act on it, I collect that information too, put it back into the loop, and this continually goes on. So I'm constantly monitoring your activities to hopefully provide you with that type of information or knowledge or nudge that will make your life, in theory, a better place. Now, the challenge that we have is where do advertisers play in this? From your point of view, okay, Dan, this is all fine and dandy. We kind of do this already. We're trying to get there. The difference is we're doing this in real time. At the time of transaction, or the time that I walk into a store, and it kind of knows that what my search history is, knows what I've been searching online for, knows what kind of music I'm listening to, probably can guess what kind of mood I'm in, right, based on the weather that's around me, or the fact that what my schedule looks like over the next couple days. It can actually sense how much stress is in my voice when it picks it up and I'm talking on the phone to somebody. There's a lot of things that you can do with all this passive information that's being collected, and that's what's represented in this box down here around the contextual engine. It's about behavior and environmentals and demographics and geolocation, et cetera. But the reality is that marketers play in the blue boxes the most. You know behavior better than anybody. Either from behavioral economics or history or just knowledge. That's what you guys do. You understand the demographics and how everybody's organized and situated and segmented, and you can kind of guess on what kind of messaging is going to resonate with an individual. But now you have the individual's history, and then, of course, any content that's associated with that to create that notification to send it out through the cloud. So it's actually, you're in the tip of the spear here on how you can change people's lives, and it has a lot of power with it. But with that power, I want to leave you with some final thoughts. Just because you can do all this. And by the way, this is real. This isn't make-believe. This isn't something that's going to happen in 2 to 3 years. This is already happening. Google Now, which is probably one of the largest contextual engines out there, has been in existence for almost 18 months. Right? It's now starting to you're starting to see it in your apps, in your native apps that you're seeing online or on your phones. It's already there. It's just now becoming more and more real-time and more important on what you do as marketers to address it. So if we go back to the time we had the telephone enabled the world to become a smaller place, right? And it was awesome. I could call anywhere. But after it matured and the marketers got a hold of it, they created telemarketers. And what did telemarketers force me to do as an individual? I stopped answering my phone. I got caller ID, and now I don't even have a home phone, right? Okay, so now how do I communicate with people? Well, I got email. This is a great invention. It's an asynchronous way to do a one-to-one or one-to-many communication paradigm. And I have all this ability to do these cool things in real time at my leisure, and I can read it when I want to read it. So I'm not beholden on having to synchronously respond to something. And then marketers' response was spam, right? And what happened was I started filtering all this email, but probably in reality is that my consumer or my personal account, I don't use that much anymore. People want to get a hold of me, they get a hold of me online, they tweet me, or they bring me in through LinkedIn, or they actually know my work email, right? And so I'm stuck on the internet, and this internet is this amazing thing. It has all the knowledge of all humanity in the palm of your hand or on your desktop. And your marketing response to that was banners and pop-ups. I don't read banners and pop-ups anymore. I've learned as an individual to filter them out. I don't even have an ad block on my machines anymore, on my phones. I just don't look at them. And anybody's website that sends me all this crap that gets in the way of me actually doing what I want at the website, I no longer go to those websites, right? So now, when you actually go to contextual awareness, what does that mean? So if this goes, I have contextual awareness, and I have this ability to have 0 degrees of separation. This is the ultimate in hyper-local marketing. You know it's for me, and the information that you should provide me is germane. And marketing's response is selling people what they need when they need it. That's awesome. I would opt in for that. That's great. So let's go back to that example where I'm standing at that candy machine, and you pop up that I'm going to get that candy bar. right? What happens, that's awesome, because I love candy bars, right? Look at me, I love candy. It's awesome. Chocolate is your friend, right? But not if you're a diabetic. Not if you're overweight and you're trying to lose weight. Not if, you know that it's bad for you. Your body can't metabolize it. So you've taken something that's really awesome, and if you give that wrong message, right, to the person, you could actually hurt them because they're going to have this trust for this information or not. So the real question for you is, people don't like it when you're following them around. They feel it's kind of creepy. Look at how we feel about the NSA, right? So here's my guidance. Do you want to change the world? Because contextual awareness will let you do that. This is the next step in where we're going with all this technology, is this guidance that we're going to have, this little good person in our ear to tell us what to do, right? Can you do this and do it without being creepy? Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Why don't you take a seat? We'll discuss some of that.